Commissioners, welcome back. Thank you. Hope you had a good stretch break. Let's see. Next is the Educator Preparation Committee. Commissioner Martinez, will you please convene the committee?
Great. Thank you so much, Chair Sloan. And again, thank you for your opening comments today and just grounding us into the challenge of the day and hopefully the opportunities as well. I'd like to call the February 2022 meeting of the Educator Preparation Committee to order. We have 7 agenda items. 4 of the items are scheduled today, perhaps maybe only 3 for today, and then we'll have the remaining 4 for tomorrow. We will announce when the public comment period is open following the presentation of each agenda item. Members of the public who wish to comment will be asked to notify the meeting moderator in the following ways. Individuals who join the meeting via the Zoom webcast will need to click on the raise hand icon to inform the meeting moderator that they'd like to speak on the item. The meeting moderator will then notify the individual when it is their turn to speak by calling out their Zoom ID. Please remember that the Zoom ID is the name used when logging into the meeting. At that time, the individual will be prompted to unmute their microphone and will be able to share their comment. Individuals who want to join the meeting via the US toll-free number, you'll need to press *9 on the phone to inform the meeting moderator that you'd like to speak on the item. The meeting moderator will notify the individual when it is their turn to speak by calling out the last 4 digits of their phone number and will allow them to unmute their phone. At the time, the individual will be prompted to press *6 and will be able to share their comment. As a reminder, public comments will be limited to 90 seconds per person, and there will be a timer. You'll see it in the Zoom windows here called the blue sky timer when we get moving with the public comments. So for now, we're going to move to item 3A. The first item, 3A, is inaugural annual report on the commission-approved teaching and administrator performance assessments. This item is being presented by Mike Taylor, Zoltan Sarda, and Gay Roby. Joining them are Nicole Marino, Director of Early Learning and Teacher Performance Assessment, Stanford Center for the Assessment, Learning, and Equity Scale, Richie Ulrich, Coordinator of the Fresno Assessment of Student Teachers, FAST, and Julia Walleitner, Assistant Director of Teacher Education at Fresno State University. This is an information item. Mr. Taylor, will you please begin?
Sure, thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Today, we're here to talk about TPA, the Commission's Performance Assessment approved models and score results for the past 3 years of implementation of those models, specifically for Cal TPA, Ed TPA, FAST, and Cal APA. You can see, as Commissioner Martinez mentioned, we've brought a lot of friends with us today, staff and the alternate model sponsors to talk about their models and the results of those models. And I understand one person who was not mentioned who is also with us if we need for answering questions is Heather Klesch from the Evaluation Systems Group of Pearson. The current models of performance assessment being used in California were approved by the Commission in 2018. And while performance assessments are not new in California, the current models are the first models to feature centralized scoring across the state, with the exception of FAST, which is only used at Fresno State and is scored there locally. This item presents teacher candidate results for the first 3 years of implementation of those models since they were approved. And just as a reminder, you guys see me here talking about exams a lot, and now I'm here talking about TPA. And one of the major benefits of performance assessments over exam-based assessments is that candidates have the ability to actually demonstrate their capacity to teach actual students and actual educators in a school site. They're able to provide evidence for their teaching and leadership knowledge in a different way from exams by writing narratives, annotating videos in response to prompts, and providing teaching and learning work samples such as lesson plans and student work products. Performance assessment candidates are provided with clear expectations regarding the elements of effective teaching and leadership, and they have opportunities to apply their knowledge and refine their responses based on feedback from support providers, peers, and others before submitting their work. The practice involved in simply completing the assessment for a performance assessment helps demonstrate competent practice for teaching candidates and reinforces ideas that are specified in the TPEs and the CAPES, which are the standards being measured by these assessments. The collaboration and support that this whole process requires amongst college and district personnel helps further develop candidates' knowledge, skills and abilities which are critical, as we know, for student success in California's diverse learning communities. This item is organized into 5 parts. Part 1 will give you a background and overview of the teaching performance assessments, Cal TPA, EdTP, and FAST. Part 2 will look at the score results and analyses of the teaching performance assessments. And Part 3 will look at the background and overview of the administrative performance assessment. Part 4 looking at score results and analysis of the administrative performance assessment. And Part 5 presents some additional information about the implementation of the performance assessments and next steps for performance assessments in California, some of which Executive Director Sandy alluded to this morning. To get started, I'm going to turn it over to Zoltan Sarda and to start discussing Cal TPA. Zoltan.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Good morning, Commissioners. I will provide a brief background about the development and structure of the current Cal TPA, followed by highlights of the data on candidate performance over the last 3 years. The current version of the Cal TPA is based on the performance assessment design standards adopted by the Commission in 2015. It was developed in partnership with a design team appointed by Dr. Mary Sandy, Executive Director, and with support from our Technical Contractor Evaluation Systems group at Pearson. The Cal TPA was first administered in 2018 for a standard setting year. Current passing standards were adopted by the Commission in 2019. Please note, in year 1, 2018-2019, the passing standard was lower. It was 15 points for cycle 1 and 17 points for cycle 2. And you will see that the score data reflects a higher passing rate for that year. The Cal TPA is based on 2 instructional cycles that embody effective teaching practices and measure the teaching performance expectations. Cycle 1 focuses on learning deeply about 1 class of students and 3 focus students. Candidates plan asset-based instruction for 1 content-specific lesson and then teach and video record the lesson. They reflect on what students learned and apply their findings to the next instruction to support both academic learning and English language development. Cycle 2 focuses on developing classroom-based assessments within a learning segment of 3 to 5 lessons, including students' use of educational technology, higher order thinking, and development of academic language. Candidates reflect on their practice and student outcomes and either reteach or extend the learning in a final teaching video to assist students to meet both content and ELD goals. Both cycles follow the same 4 steps of plan, teach and assess, reflect, and apply. Both cycles focus on universal design for learning approaches and development of deep content knowledge and academic language. Bilingual, candidates may submit their responses to the instructional cycles in the language of instruction. Candidate performance is evaluated using an analytic rubric scoring process. Cycle 1 consists of 8 rubrics with a passing standard of 18 points, and candidates are allowed 1 score of 1. Cycle 2 has an additional rubric with a passing score of 21, also with 1 score of 1 allowed. Once candidates submit their cycles to Pearson's secure electronic platform, trained assessors score submissions and the results are sent to candidates, programs, and the CTC within 3 weeks. Assessors are continuously trained and monitored for calibration to assure validity and reliability. And scoring is based on a 5-point rubric that provide detailed descriptions of the levels of performance. Each rubric represents multiple TPEs. At times, condition codes may be applied to submissions with errors or omissions and are returned to candidates unscored. At this point, I'd like to just acknowledge the tremendously valuable support preliminary programs and now induction programs have provided candidates through the performance assessment process, in part particularly through the last 2 years of COVID upheaval. To support this important work, the CTC has a variety of programs and candidate supports in place, including program and candidate office hours, quarterly meetings for program coordinators, and a series of webinars providing information about best practices. In addition, the CTC YouTube channel and website provide extensive video resources and comprehensive program guides. One additional benefit to this work is that a statewide supportive community of practice among programs is developing in order to support candidates. Turning to the data, which you'll see analyzed on pages 12 through 15 of the item, and it's included in Appendix B. So across the data, year 1 results are robust, reflecting the lower passing standard I mentioned earlier. The 2 subsequent years' passing rates and scores have remained consistent despite complications for candidates, programs, and schools related to COVID and school closures. Approximately 90% of candidates who took both cycles have passed. 9,781 candidates have provided evidence of effective teaching practice in both cycles over the last 3 years. There's a slightly lower passing rate for cycle 1 than cycle 2, which most likely is a result of candidates completing that cycle after cycle 1, and that usually happens later in their preliminary program experiences. And they have also received formative feedback on their cycle 1 submissions. The data does reveal a diminishing number of attempts over the last 2 years, probably due to COVID and executive order flexibility options, allowing candidates to delay passing a TPA post receiving their preliminary credential. In the first quarter of the current year, staff have seen evidence that submission numbers will likely return to pre-COVID levels. So for the cycle 1 rubrics, the performance is fairly consistent at the mid to high 2 level across the last 2 years. Rubric 1.6, with slightly lower scores, focuses on monitoring deep learning of content and establishing next steps for learning. This teaching practice has been an ongoing focus of webinars and program supports. Across both cycles, we have also focused efforts to improve candidate performance related to asset-based instruction, connecting to prior learning, and effective reflection. For the cycle 2 planning rubrics have been consistently strong across the last 3 years. Scores on teach and assess rubrics related to the development of academic language, use of educational technology, and informal assessments to monitor student progress have also shown consistent strength. An area of focus for further development is rubric 2.6, assessing candidates' ability to engage students in self-assessment. This is still a developing concept in the field, and as with cycle 1 target areas, the CTC performance assessment team has continuously provided support for programs and candidates in this area. For each of the past 3 years, based on survey feedback from candidates, programs, and assessors, and score data, the 2 cycle 1 and cycle 2 assessment guides have been updated and edited for clarity and cohesion. The ethnicity data tables found in Appendix B illustrate consistent performance across subgroups over the last 3 years. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Nicole Marino from EdTPA. Thank you.
Great, thank you, everyone. I'm going to just go back to the, sorry, I have to navigate through the agenda item, but I believe is going along. Just give a brief overview of EdTPA, and then I'll do the same with the data. So EdTPA is it's a performance assessment that is, again, embedded within the program, and it is based on a single cycle of teaching. And so the candidates complete 1 cycle of teaching, and there's 3 tasks: planning, instruction, and assessment. And for multiple subjects, we added a 4th task where they do in a second content area. So either literacy or math can be the first chunk, and then the second chunk can be the other subject. So again, just a brief overview, candidates are asked to plan their instruction, implement that instruction, and then collect some evidence of student learning based on an assessment. Within each task, candidates have the opportunity to reflect and analyze and propose revisions considering their knowledge of students and the data that they collected. And so they do have an opportunity within each task to then state, for example, what they might change, propose changes, or considering what they learned during that experience, how they might revise their instruction or next steps for learning. The EdTPA is aligned and consistent with the TPEs, and they, again, for multiple subjects, we have the additional task 4, which is really a focused on a focused instruction with a group of students, and they get a chance to re-engage students in a particular set of learning. Similar to what was discussed with the CalTPA, based on analytic rubrics, 5-point scale, and there's some information and links on there so you can see about each performance on the rubric. We have a similar structure with condition codes, and candidates are given the outline for condition code and also feedback on how they might address each of those. Again, similar assessor recruitment training and support for the trainers. EdTPA relies on a National Academy of Consultants. And again, these are folks that are higher education teachers, really those have a role supporting candidates and assist with the field as well. And then I will just scroll down, sorry, the data for EdTPA, I wrote it down, is on page 17. So I'm just gonna scroll down there for a second. So that begins, I believe it's table 7. And so this first table has EdTPA first attempt pass rates, and we see for the 3 years that we have the lowest year is in the last year, which is 2021. And again, similar to what was listed for the CalTPA, we attribute those perhaps to COVID challenges. But pretty similar, we do see a lower N as well, and acknowledging that there are candidates that chose not to submit, perhaps due to the governor's executive order, but the number did go down a bit. Overall pass rates for EdTPA, again, there are similar trends across all the years. And so we do see that lower N in the 2021 year. Table 9 looks at the first attempt score means by individual rubric. And so you have 2 tables here. This goes across all of the rubrics 1 through 15 for the first 3 tasks. And then we added the last 3 so that you can see for the task 4 as well. We see that the candidates with stronger performances in rubric 12, and then they trend lower for the year 3, and looking at really rubric 10, which has a slightly lower mean than previous years. And then lastly, with the condition codes, again, we see somewhat a similar trend there where the last year is going up. It's noted that in that last year, the 2021, we see that candidates, the most common response for reason for assigning a condition code was because there was no response included. And so it's interesting when I looked at these data that was a similar condition code, the highest frequency for the 18-19 year, which was technically a little bit pre-COVID, but we do see that same condition code being applied. And then I do note that so we moved the ethnicity data down to appendix D, but you also have that there. So I will pass this back over to you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. We're going to move right along to our friends from Fresno State and have them tell us about FAST.
Great, thank you so much. Do I have the option to share my screen? Or is that not a possibility? I don't need it.
I don't know the answer to that. Maybe our technical help at the commission office.
I just give you the access.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay. We did prepare a slideshow just to kind of go through our talking points with you. So good morning. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be here. My name is Juliette Wallleitner, and I'm the Assistant Director of Teacher Education at Fresno State. And I am joined by Ricky Ulrich, who is our FAST coordinator. So the FAST, the Fresno Assessment of Student Teaching. Just a quick background overview. The FAST was developed in-house at Fresno State with funding from a Title II grant back in the early 2000s. It was originally reviewed and approved by the commission in 2007. And then in 2018, it was updated to align with the current design standards and the updated TPEs. That was also approved. One of the things that we love about the FAST at Fresno State is that it is integrated into our teacher education program. We have course assignments that align or that were created to align with tasks. The rubrics that are used to assess candidates on the FAST are used by our coaches or our university supervisors as they evaluate the teaching of our candidates. We have faculty who are involved in the assessment, so that gives them just a real clear understanding of what is being asked of our candidates on this performance assessment. And then I think important to note, though I know that with the budget updates, this may not be as much of an issue, but FAST is fully funded by Fresno State's Kremen School of Education and Human Development. So that means there's no cost to our students. Again, it's fully integrated into our program. So Ricky's now going to talk with you about the components.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Thank you to the Commission for letting us share about our FAST. First, we'd like to share with you, you have the information in your agenda today, but the first task students in our program have to complete along with their initial student teaching is the site visitation project. In this project, they demonstrate their ability and readiness to create lesson plans, gather information on the students that they are working with, and to develop strategies. They then implement a lesson, which is observed by, we call them coaches, the people that are out in the field watching them or observing them of late virtually. And then they evaluate this process, this lesson, by a reflection and self-evaluation. It's a 20 to 45 minute lesson, either whole class or small group. We've certainly had interesting flexibility through COVID, but very great resiliency with our school sites and our candidates. We focus on a content area and language development in this project. And there are, in the 3 sections, a 4-point rubric tied to each one, as you can see in the bullets below, with a variety of TPEs across most domains. In the site visitation project, we do cover all but assessment. So moving into our next task that our students complete, in the final student teaching, they have a teaching sample project, which is a lengthy project that assesses their ability to plan and integrate a unit of study with content and literacy. It is a cohesive 5-lesson unit minimally, it could be more, that includes 7 sections. And in these 7 sections, there's a 4-point rubric tied to each section. Beginning with the students in context, this is where they gather the background information necessary to know for the students that they're going to be working with during the semester. And this includes data, demographic information, learning style information, and maybe even some personal cumulative information on their students. The second section is learning outcomes, where they decide which standards, both in the content and ELA, ELD areas, to begin to think about in relationship to the students that they're working with. And then the third is an assessment plan tied to these learning outcomes, both a pre-assessment, formative assessment, and then assessment which acknowledges their summative data. After they have these 3 sections developed, they design their instruction with those 5 cohesive lesson plans, and they give an overview of this, but then they do a very detailed lesson plan for 3 of their lessons in this project. After that, they teach the lessons and then go into a section about the instructional decisions they make based upon how that lesson went or how the unit went. And from there, they are able to analyze their pre-assessment data, their formative measures, as well as the summative data. And then lastly, they do reflect upon the unit of instruction, both meeting the standards, how the students did, and then a self-evaluation for their professional development. So it's very authentic. In our scoring processes, I have the responsibility of orientating and training all of our coaches and faculty yearly. So our student assessments are scored by the faculty and coaches, and we do training for our site visitation project and calibration specifically in the fall. And then we do calibration trainings in the spring with the teaching sample project. However, we have new coaches coming on board yearly and semester. So we do trainings each semester depending upon the needs of our coaches. It is mandatory for all of our coaches to be calibrated throughout the assessment process, and that our scores achieve an understanding through this calibration to be aligned within a plus or minus 1 on the 4-point rubric.
So we do go through the psychometric analyses. 15% of our projects are double scored annually. And then with that analysis that does take place every 2 years, 100% of the scores are within that plus or minus 1 score point. And 94.7% agree on whether or not a project should ultimately pass or fail. So moving into the results and analysis, these are on pages 19 through 21 of your agenda item. So this just provides you all attempt pass rates for all submissions over the last 3 years. As you can see, pretty consistent high pass rates. There were some struggles in 2019, 2020 with pandemic. You can also see a little bit of dip in the total number of candidates who attempted the FAST in that year. Again, like others have mentioned, most likely due to the executive order. When we look at the scores on the site visitation project, again, this is the first task. Scores are relatively consistent across the 3 years, across multiple subject and single subject. And then we see the same thing with the teaching sample project. If anything, what we see are some slight increases. I think a big part of that reason is because of the integration of this within our coursework and because of faculty's familiarity with it. So again, some primary takeaways: overall high pass rates, even within the pandemic. Mean scores have remained stable with slight increases. And again, the points we made earlier, faculty embed related tasks within our coursework, just giving it that added authenticity. Coaches use the rubrics during their observation debriefs to guide the reflections, making the candidates very familiar with those rubrics, with what's being asked of them. And then the candidate performance is used to inform future instruction. This is a very authentic opportunity for our faculty to use the data from the FAST to inform what they do in their courses. So with that, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I will stop sharing and turn it over to the next presenters.
All right, next up for us is Gay Roby to talk about Cal APA.
Good morning, commissioners. I hope you're at a window at least to see a beautiful day outside. We're turning now from the teaching performance assessment into our administrator performance assessment, or what we call the Cal APA. And because the Cal TPA and the Cal APA were both developed under the guidance of CTC and evaluation systems, they share many of the same structures and protocols. So I'll be referencing Zoltan instead of repeating Zoltan's comments. While the Cal TPA was being redesigned in 2015, the Cal APA was being initially designed following the same procedures. So in 2015, the Commission adopted design standards for an administrative performance assessment. A 2-year design team developed the assessment and then piloted the initial assessment, made some changes, and came back and field tested it with a volunteer group of programs. Following that volunteer group of implementation, a passing standard was set, which I'll refer to a little bit later on, and full implementation started in the fall of 2018, and this report goes through June of 2020. Unlike the Cal TPA's 3 systems, the Cal APA is the sole performance assessment for leadership candidates in California. It's very foundational to the development of the Cal APA to remember that the Commission determined that preliminary administrative services credentialing programs would concentrate on the school site administration and preparing candidates to become a site administrator. Secondly, the California administrator content expectations. And thirdly, the California administrator performance expectations. The California Administrator Performance Expectations, which we lovingly call the CAPE, are aligned one-on-one to what are known as the CAPSUL, California's Professional Standards for Educational Leaders. And they serve as probably 90% of our program standard to measure administrator performance for them. And as Zoltan mentioned, multiple CAPE are measured in each leadership cycle. The design team identified 3 responsibilities for every site administrator and built a CAPE around those. Leadership cycle 1, analyzing data to inform school performance and to promote equity. They asked candidates to demonstrate their leadership skills in making school improvement decisions based on an analysis of data and research. Leadership cycle 2, which is facilitating communities of practice, requires candidates to demonstrate their leadership skills in leading a small group of educators through an identification and implementation of a change in practice strategy that is going to either advance student skills or student well-being. Again, that change is identified through an analysis of data and research. Leadership cycle 3, supporting teacher growth, engages our candidates in educational coaching cycles, including an identification of a volunteer teacher, the observation of a CSTP-focused lesson, and a reflective coaching conversation following the lesson. All 3 cycles also use a recursive pattern, but our pattern is investigate, plan, act, and reflect, wherein leadership candidates look at what currently exists in practice at that school site before they plan to make a change, implement that change, and then reflect upon their leadership learning during the practice of the cycle. And in addition, cycles 2 and 3 have a video component that cycle 1 does not have. Scoring follows the structure that Zoltan explained for the Cal TPA, but it is important to note that the current passing standard for the Cal APA was made when we were a little bitty new program. It was the end of a field test. It was volunteer programs. Not everyone in the state had implemented. So it was a time when program administrators and instructional faculty, supervisors at the program and the site level, they were all still needing to learn about the program's components. And as such, the passing score was set so that that statewide learning of the system could continue, and then equity for all populations could be monitored. Turning to the data tables, they are found on page 27 or in Appendix I, which is on page 47. Tables 15 and 16 talk about passage rates. 98% of our candidates in the last 3 years have passed all 3 cycles of the Cal APA. And in Appendix I, you will find ethnicity data tables that reflect that this consistent performance is applicable across all subpopulation groups as well. Table 17 shows the attempts for all cycles. So if a candidate took 1 or 2 of the cycles instead of all 3, passage rates there are reflective of the high passage rates of Table 16. Table 18 are rubric means across the cycles. They show the majority of candidates are coming closer every year to that 3-point level. Every year I'm hoping for more. They'll make it to that 3, and they will soon. It also shows that reflection rubrics show that are the lowest scoring rubrics. Our candidates have a hard time in reflecting and writing it down pen to paper. Table 19, condition codes. Cycle 1 has consistently received the least number of condition codes. Cycles 2 and 3 with their video components represent the most frequent condition codes assigned, highlighting the need that candidates are still learning the skills of video recording, annotating, and editing. And with that, I just turn it over to Mike Taylor to discuss part 5.
Thanks, Gay. Part 5 of this item, which begins on page 29, contains additional information about the implementation of the performance assessments, including information about institutional reports, COVID flexibilities, and how the Commission's performance assessments are reviewed for potential bias. The use of performance assessment data in program accreditation has been one of the more valuable outcomes of the implementation of these performance assessments in California. Performance assessments are able to measure subject-specific pedagogical content that's not measured by CSET or the other California credential examinations. And this data has been useful information for both accreditation teams and program staff interested in performance assessment data for program improvement. In terms of next steps, there's two new assessments currently being developed, as Executive Director Sandy mentioned this morning, in one for early childhood and one for preliminary education specialists. And then later this spring and summer, the commission staff will begin work on development of a reading and literacy performance assessment, and will hold a standard setting for the Cal APA. That is the end of our presentation, and we're all here to answer questions commissioners may have.
Thank you so much, Mike, and the entire team for going over that. It's a lot of information, so thank you. We are now going to open up for public comment. So just going to go through the logistics of that again. If there are members of the public that would like to give a presentation, please notify the meeting moderator by clicking on the raise hand icon if participating through Zoom, or pressing *9 if participating by phone. There will be a 90-minute time limit, 90-second time limit, I think is what it's supposed to say. The timer will be in the Zoom window and it'll warn you when the time is coming to close. If you go over your time, your microphone may be muted. Recording secretary, shall we start with the opening comments?
Yes, first is Ursula Estrada Reveles. Please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Good morning, Chair Sloan and members of the commission. My name is Dr. Ursula Estrada Reveles, and I serve as the Executive Director of the School of Education at Riverside County Office of Ed. As a first-generation college student who graduated from Roosevelt High School in Boyle Heights, who completed my credential through an alternative route through the LAUSD intern program, and as a member of the Cal APA design team and the mother of a future educator, I'm in favor of both teacher and administrator performance assessments. I'd like to draw your attention to the letter from the California County Superintendent Educational Services Association, or CSESA, that notes the supportive position of all county offices regarding this matter. So it's written by the chair of the CIS committee, Jennifer Hicks of Placer County. We were in tune, so as a member of the Cal APA design team, we were in tune to the needs of students in California while we developed the particular assessment. Oh my goodness. It is as members of the commission, it's your charge to ensure that our educators are prepared to navigate the realities of working in today's school. This is no simple task given the evolving complexities of students in K-12. It's essential that we maintain high standards for those who have the goal of becoming a teacher. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Estrada Reveles. Just a clarifying is that the first beep is for 30 seconds, and maybe the second beep, less of a siren, hopefully next time, will be that you have 10 seconds left. So sorry if the timers disrupt your flow. So it's 30 seconds is the first warning, and then 10 seconds is the second warning. Okay, so recording secretary, I want to continue with the public comments, please.
Yes, the individual logged in as S. Winlock at scoe.net. Please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, commissioners and CTC staff. My name is Steve Winlock. I'm the director of the School of Education for Sacramento County Office of Ed. And I just wanted to kind of share that our goals are really to make sure that we're providing high quality teachers and leaders for our districts in our region. And I just wanted to underscore that the assessment, the performance assessments have helped us in dealing with that and working with that. I think through the programs and the way that our programs got around the program assessments are asking for teachers and leaders and their work that they need to do. And I just wanted to stress that the assessments have really helped us in kind of guiding what teachers need to be doing as we talk about establishing the work that needs to be happening for teachers, as well as the work for administrators and leaders It has been phenomenal in that sense. Our programs have been kind of worked and geared around looking at those core areas that are needed in both of those areas as we talk about the teaching profession and all, whereas in the administrative. We are guiding their work, and I can't think of anything more exciting than making sure that we're addressing what is needed for the teaching and leading in the state around education. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in. Recording secretary.
Ruchi Raghunath, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hello, thank you commissioners for your time today. My name is Ruchi Ranganath and I'm a professor at USF in the Department of Teacher Education. I'm writing on behalf of Care.ed and Care.ed, the California Alliance of Researchers in Education, represents over 600 educational researchers, teachers, and community organizers. We believe that the state of California should put an end to the use of mandated teacher performance in California Teacher Ed's program. This includes divorcing TPAs from all high-stakes decision-making and ending expenses related to TPAs from burdening students, programs, and public funds. In a thorough review of relevant research, we found that high-stakes assessments like the Ed TPA do not improve education for students and for teachers, and have already proven to widen inequities. This research is outlined in Care.ed's 2019 brief around barriers and gatekeepers in diversifying the teacher pipeline. In the brief, we detail our concerns around the design, validity, and reliability, the impact of TPAs on program curriculum and candidate performers, barriers to diversity, and the impact on our teacher shortage in California. California already has rigorous standards and already has rigorous accreditation process that evaluates whether candidates are meeting those standards. Therefore, there is no need for California to deprofessionalize and delegitimize educators by dictating how programs are to assess their candidates. And where California has dictated the use of particular instruments that have proven to be counterproductive and harmful, such policies must be repealed. We call an immediate end to the mandated use of teacher performance assessments in California teacher ed programs. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in. Madam Secretary, recording secretary.
Melissa Metzi Hall, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me? Excellent. So I'm Dr. Melissa Metz Hall, and I work in San Bernardino and Riverside County offices. I'm here to speak in support of the strength and the positive impact of our performance assessment system in California. Item 3A covers so many of the factual components of California's performance assessment work to date. What I'd like to add is my perspective as an instructor in both teacher preparation programs and administrative services programs, as well as my perspective as one of the lead assessor and trainers for the Cal APA Cycle 3. First, from my work with candidates, I know that the structure of our Cal TPA and Cal APA performance assessments provide important opportunities to support and develop educators, specifically their ability to engage in evidence-based reflection. It's important that within our preparation programs, we continue iterative opportunities for candidates to engage in the crucial practice of reflection. These repeated practices can lead to the increased self-efficacy and candidates' perspective of themselves as professionals who make a difference for California students. As the lead assessor, I also affirm that we engage in rigorous ongoing training, calibration, and validity training. I urge us as part of our education community to embrace the potentiality of change in practice through performance assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Recording secretary.
Terrell Sales, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Perfect. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Terrell Billy Sales. I'm a professor of teacher education at Pepperdine University. I'm in support of the Cal TPA. I believe the Cal TPA does a great job in preparing novice teachers to further engage in research-based best practices and critical pedagogies that are essential to the teaching profession, particularly in preparing teachers who are not from traditionally marginalized population, begin the work of actively addressing, engaging, and altering both implicit and explicit biases and deficit thinking practices that they may have towards students of color, English learners, and students with exceptionalities. The Cal TPA's tenets of plan, teach, and assess and reflect are essential staples that, when adequately utilized and effectively taught by faculty, help prepare future beginning teachers to practice and develop teaching strategies and learning activities that are pertinent and important to their growth in not only the science and methodology of teaching, but also the art and heart of teaching. I firmly believe that the Cal TPA is a great learning tool for preparing future beginning teachers to create meaningful, student-informed, student-centered lesson plans and assessments that push beginning teachers towards greater understanding and application of culturally sensitive and culturally relevant practices. This assessment, when used as a learning tool, also helps many beginning teachers make use of universal design for learning in very practical and tangible ways. The assessment has been revelatory in highlighting the true discipline of education for beginning teachers, helping them see the detailed intricacies that must be evident in the minds and practices of educators in order to fully and sufficiently serve all learners within the classroom setting, regardless of who they are, where they are from, and how they learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sells. Recording Secretary.
Jason Lee, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Happy Friday Eve to all of you. I appreciate this. I'm going to come under my 90 seconds. I'm Dr. Jason Lee, the Executive Director of North Coast School of Ed out of Sonoma County Office of Education. Prior to this, I spent many years in a district supporting principal and principal professional development, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Cal APA. I see this as a very important learning tool for our candidates going through our program to see and identify the real hard work that takes place as a principal. That is evaluating and finding the equity gap, changing mindset, and changing what happens for students on their desks on a daily basis. And that's what those 3 cycles mean in our program, and really what we try to impart upon our participants. I also encourage the Commission to continue the work they've done to ensure that this isn't another obstacle that is preventing our underrepresented population in becoming either teachers through the NTPA or leaders in our schools in the Cal APA. I've had the good fortune of being a part of that work. We had some amazing conversations around ensuring that we are doing right by all students and participants in California. And so I appreciate this opportunity to speak. Have a great weekend. I gave 15 seconds back.
Thank you so much. You made up for the ones that went over a little bit. Recording Secretary.
Ron Rapp, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Good morning, Chair Sloan, Executive Director Sandy, and Commissioners. Thank you all for your service. My name is Ron Rapp. I'm the Legislative Director for the California Faculty Association. We represent 29,000 members at all 23 campuses of the CSU. Our members prepare over 50% of the teachers in the state. Very clearly, the CFA believes that the state of California should end the mandated use of teacher performance assessments in teacher education programs. My comments echo the sentiments of Care Ed. There are a number of reasons why we believe this. First, we have serious concerns about the design, validity, and reliability of the TPAs. In a recent article in the American Educational Research Journal, the author state, in light of our research findings, we argue that the uses of the EdTPA are currently unwarranted. Secondly, we have serious concerns about the impact of the program on curriculum and candidate performance. A nationwide network of education deans recently argued that these assessments and their use for high-stakes decisions overly prescribes the teacher education curriculum and results in teaching to the test. Third, we believe that the TPAs are barriers to teacher diversity. Recent studies document how high-stakes assessments serve as barriers to expanding the number and diversity of quality teacher candidates. Finally, as Chair Sloan mentioned in her opening comments, California continues to experience a severe teacher shortage. We believe that the TPAs contribute to this shortage. My written comments provide additional details about our position. We look forward to working with the Commission to improve the teacher credentialing process in the state and at the same time ensuring the quality and diversity of our teaching workforce. Thank you.
Thank you. Recording secretary? Are there other public comments?
Yes, Melody Thorson, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Good morning, Chair Sloan and members of the commission. I am Melody Thorson. I am the Director of Leadership and Learning Collaborative for Placer County Office of Education. We are a commission-approved agency offering a total of 5 teacher and administrative preparation programs. As a county office of education, we have several staff members who serve as assessors for both the Cal APA and TPA. We are supportive of teacher and administrative performance assessments as a tool for educators to demonstrate their capacity, skills, and abilities to be effective practitioners. This is a critical component for ensuring that we are developing a workforce with strong skills and abilities to serve the diverse students of California. As an agency, we are thoughtful and purposeful in how we provide candidate support through the performance assessment process. Some of these supports include weekly candidate office hours, communities of practice, creation of tools and supports, structured course sessions, and connections through PLC topics and fieldwork assignments. We are looking forward to engaging in continuous improvement opportunities around the implementation of California's educator performance assessments, both through accreditation activities as well as other partnership opportunities with CTC staff. I also want to thank CTC staff for their ongoing support, outreach, and partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Recording secretary?
Harold Acord, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Harold Acord, and I am speaking on the almost 300,000, on the behalf of almost 300,000 members of the California Teachers Association. We do see a lot of data in this item, but we don't see anything related to teachers' evaluation or perception of the usefulness of TPAs in preparing them for their careers or their assignments. As CTA, we are interested in data showing teachers' perceptions of the value of the TPAs in preparing them for assignments and for their careers. We'd like to know if such data does exist. If not, why does it not? If so, where is it? And how is it used in the ongoing improvement of TPA content and processes? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Recording secretary?
There are no additional requests for public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's give it a couple seconds to close out there. Okay, the public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? And or do CTC staff want to respond to any specific questions from the public comments? Okay, so commissioners, just raise your virtual hand or wave me down, unmute, give me a hint if you want to make a comment. Okay, Commissioner Francois. And then Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. I really appreciate the amount of work and attention that went into this item. It was a lot to digest. And I want to preface my comments by saying that I appreciate the value of performance assessments and evaluating candidate readiness to enter into the profession. On behalf of the UC system, the CSU system, and our independent colleges and universities, we've been using performance assessments for decades now. And so we see how important they are. I think that what challenges me every time we have this conversation is, do we need to use performance assessment in such a high stakes way? It changes how candidates engage with it. It changes the way schools of education and teacher education programs in particular, it changes their curriculum. I have seen classes, that are 100% TPA support, which in and of itself is not a bad thing, except what it does is it takes the performance assessment piece of it and it doesn't necessarily embedded in programs. There's a difference between embedding within coursework and fieldwork and having something separate to, and I think that has a lot to do with the affect that the TPAs, the EdTPA, CalAPA, whatever the performance assessment is, the affect it creates for its candidate in terms of the high stakes nature of it. The other thing that continues to concern me is I look at the pass rates for the EdTPA in particular, and thank you, Dr. Moreno, for your presentation. It was really helpful. And I've raised this question before. The pass rates for Black candidates continues to fall short on the EdTPA when compared to the other candidates. And so we've been doing EdTPA for a while. And I'm wondering, Dr. Moreno, if you have any information, based on the data as to why that is, because it does seem, and I could be wrong, it does seem that there's a consistent trend there, which leads me to, it just leads me to question. It leads to a whole lot of questions. And I also want to echo the comments made by Mr. Accord from the CTA. I think it's really important that we look at data about candidates' perception of their readiness based on that, EdTPA helped or TPA helped them to feel more prepared to go into the classroom. And I think there's data that we need to look at about how does that translate into their own teacher evaluation and performance once they become teachers. I don't know what that data is, but Dr. Moreno, if you can speak to that, that would be great.
Great. Thank you. And hello, Dr. Francois, Commissioner Francois. Nice to see everyone. I will try to get to each question, and I'm not sure if I do it in the right order, so just remind me if I miss something. The first question I want to address is the performance of African Americans. And within the data that we presented, you'll see there are differences. And one of the studies that we've done, looking at it, we started nationally because we do see the trends in the California data also come nationally. TPA is a national performance assessment, but what you have is California data particularly. And we do see those similar trends. And one of the research studies that we started was looking at programs that are not following that trend, that have a high representation of candidates of color, particularly African Americans. And our initial discoveries of that is that context matters, and that sometimes, and other states have raised the question as well, that they are seeing state trends, or they might be seeing program trends that don't necessarily follow other programs. And so the question is, well, why is that? What's going on in these programs? How are these programs supporting their candidates of color, the candidates that are within their program, and communities that perhaps are, needing different things, or what is it? So I think it's a great question. It's one that we did initially start digging into. I do think that looking deeper into programs is worth it. And again, we have found that programs are not following similar trends that perhaps the state data is showing. So I think that's something to definitely consider. The other question that you asked about following beyond, there are some studies that we have, and even studies that started initially with the performance estimate California teachers, was started as PACT back in the day. And there are some studies that have put out predictive validity studies, and we have those on our edtpa.com website. Not all of them are California based. It's very difficult, as you all know, as researchers, to follow those data into once they leave the program and get access in particular to how the student performance is doing. So there are some challenges there, but there are some studies that we have looking at teachers that then once they leave preparation, then what, that have gone through performance assessment into the classroom.
Thank you for that. And I appreciate the acknowledgement that there's something that needs to be looked into. as we make these decisions, particularly as it relates to our candidates of color, in particular Black candidates that are taking both the administrator and teacher performance expectation. And I would also like to recommend that we look at programs, and we look at programs deeply with a focus on that around the diversity and who's passing and who's not passing. And we also make an effort, a statewide effort, to understand the experience of candidates from their voices, from their words, not from program leadership, but from the actual candidates that took the Ed TPA and maybe, or TPA and maybe struggled with it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Francois. Okay, so we're going to go to Commissioner Brown, and then following Commissioner Brown, Commissioner De La Torre, and then Commissioner White-Smith.
Well, Commissioner Francois, you just brought up both the issues that I was going to bring up, and I really appreciate that. I think that it's really, I really appreciate all that the commission and the presenters have tried to show us in attempting to do something that is complicated to do, which is how do we help teachers as learners learn what they need to learn, and then how do we find out if they know and be able to do it. So this idea of planning and teaching and reflecting, and same for administrators, is not an easy thing to do, but is absolutely essential. The question is the way we do it the right way or good enough? And I know that we're looking at examinations, and we're also looking at performance assessments. I don't think we can say, just give the learner what we think we want them to learn and don't check to see if they know it. I think a person needs to know if they know it and can do it. So I would second what Commissioner Francois did say, and one of our speakers, I think it was Mr. Accord, said, is how do the teacher candidates see this work, and did that work help them become good teachers? That's enough for me, and I cede the rest of my time to my fellow commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Commissioner De La Torre?
Thank you. And I have similar concerns. I appreciate all the work and effort that went into this work, but the purpose of it is to make sure that we're helping the teaching profession improve. And if we lose sight of that focus and this becomes a barrier to allowing teachers to enter the profession, then I don't see how this can be helping California's situation. We need to be sure that these Cal APAs and Ed TPAs are actually helping teachers be better prepared for the classroom. And as Mr. Accord mentioned, we don't see that. What is the evidence of that? And if there are peer-reviewed articles in the Research of Education that show that this hasn't improved the teaching profession, then we shouldn't have it as such a high stakes assessment for candidates of the teaching profession. I'm just concerned about that. So there's a lot of information that I think we need to look at to make sure that we're not hindering the progress of the teaching profession in California. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner De La Torre. I just want to acknowledge that after Commissioner White-Smith, we have Student Liaison Baez and then Commissioner Gross. Did we just lose?
You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm mute.
Okay. Thank you.
Apologies. I echo my support for the comments by Commissioner De La Torre and Commissioner Francois. With regards to this, when I was an assistant professor many years ago at Chapman University, and you know that I represent the AICCU, the Independent Colleges and Universities, I was amongst the first to implement the TPA. And at the time, it felt very developmental and very, it was summative, and it really supported the direction and, you know, the work moving forward with the teacher candidates in a way that felt authentic. We had assessors that were local. that understood our programs, how they operated, what they were framed around. And so it felt more like a community lift in support of the teacher candidates. And as you know, I represent a sector that actually credentials 50% of the teachers in the state of California. I don't know if folks are aware that the independents actually credential that many folks. And many of us, including my own institution, is a minority serving institution. We happen to be an HSI. So we also serve high numbers of students that are students of color. I think that in these conversations, we need to be careful about the ways that we characterize our students from communities of color, and the language is important. And I want us to be aware that sometimes when we say the word supporting our students of color, in my mind, it feels like fixing. And so in thinking of the EdTPA and the results from the EdTPA and the disproportionality to Black students, I think that we need to look more deeply around not necessarily the deficits of the students and their ability to pass the test, but what about the test that does not allow success for those students? Because this is the same way we operationalize education in PK-12 spaces as well. If we're really going to be community-centered and focused on the wealth of knowledge and skills and experiences of communities of color and folks of color, I think we really need to kind of change how we operationalize these particular assessments. Thank you.
Thank you. Student Liaison Baez, and then Commissioner Gross, and then Commissioner Simmons.
Hi, thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to thank everybody in the public who decided to come out and speak today. It's because of the public coming to speak that we have things to be able to talk about and different perspectives to reflect on. And I want to stick with that word reflection as I speak to everybody about how I'm currently in the process of the EdTPA. So I've been recording this week. I record tomorrow for my last lesson. And so I'm in the thick of it. You know, I'm right here walking with a lot of with my students, with my classmates, and with all of the student teachers who are also working on the EdTPA right now. And I use that word reflection because something that I actually enjoy about the EdTPA is the time put aside to reflect on your lessons, reflect on this idea of being a purposeful educator. And with that, I feel like I've learned so much, even just in this week of recording and even recording that before that, the strategic lesson planning and reminding yourself of what is my language demand? You know, what am I using here to support my students in the classroom and breaking down the lessons so carefully? And so I really like the idea of reflection that goes into these performance assessments. But I think one thing that Commissioner Francois brought up was that it's important to look at who is passing these, who is this, for lack of a better word, supporting, or who is this encouraging, for a better word, encouraging to become a teacher and to be a part of the California community of teachers. And I think along with who is where in California are we seeing the data results be positive, and where are we seeing them maybe fall behind, and looking at that specifically. And yeah, so I think that's kind of where I wanted to go with that. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing from your personal experience. Commissioner Gross.
So I've been reflecting on a couple the public comments and additionally one of the written comments from a professor at UC Santa Cruz about how are we responsive? Like, how do we design authentic assessments that inform our own teaching practice and that provide feedback to students? And that's something that I see in the FAST program, right, where it's really integrated into your credentialing program. And so and looking at your pass rates, right? And you've removed the barriers of cost. Like that's very intriguing to me. And I'm just wondering, how do we take something like the Cal TPA and have a you know, the standardized system and make and help that be integrated in a way where, you know, those rubrics, you know, are available. Like, can faculty go out when they're coaching and supervising students? Like, how do we learn from programs that are experiencing success? Is a wondering I have. Another wondering I have is just who is passing in terms of intern candidates and traditional student teaching candidates. Is there a difference there? Because one of the things that I've noticed as an adjunct faculty for both public and private universities is that our students are interns and they're overwhelmed, right? And they're trying to manage the children in front of them and provide them this quality education. And it just feels like one more thing. And so how do we not make this one more thing and one more hoop for everyone to jump through? Which I know is probably an ongoing burning question of all of us. But I do really wish, and I think I wrote down, I'm sorry, I forget which commissioner said this, but like, how do we make this authentic, informative assessment? Because folks in the field at our County Office of Education are saying this is useful. And so, you know, I feel like we have that duality again of it's useful, it's not useful. And so I'd love more information on why it's useful for the county offices of ed and why it's not being experienced as useful in our institutes of higher education, and what that actual candidate perspective is as well. So those are my wonderings.
A great summary. Thank you so much. Your last 3 points. Commissioner Simmons and then Commissioner Grenner-Shire.
Okay, I want to start by saying that I was, back when this all started, I was opposed to it because it seemed to me that it was bureaucratizing teaching, which was not it didn't lend itself to that. But I gotta say, over the past few years, the quality of teachers that we are getting is really high and really amazing. The things that they're able to do right out of a program. So I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I wonder if, and reflecting on what Commissioners Gross and White-Smith said, I wonder if our move to centralized scoring has been problematic, and if that has done anything to impede that sort of community of learning that Commissioner White-Smith described and that Fresno described. Is there anybody that on the commission who sort of has gone through the process, and was that a sea change when we went to centralized scoring?
Good afternoon, commissioners. It's almost afternoon. David, great questions. So I was around for that, and I could speak to that for a second, and others might want to chime in. When we were doing localized scoring, remember we started this work for the TPA work way back in the early 2000s, and it became a requirement in 2008. And we were doing localized scoring. And there was a lot of learning that happened because of that, and a lot of opportunity for those who not only provided the instructional coursework and the support during clinical practice to come together then and really look at teaching practice together and talk about it, and then go back and think about how to support candidates in their growth and development. And it provided an opportunity for really developing a common language in how we talked about the qualities of teaching practice. As we moved along, we realized that the data and the scoring was shifting in ways that was not always defensible in any reliable or valid kind of way. So we started to see some some slipping in many places, though it was done very well. But as we moved along, we also found that we wanted in our accreditation process to have a measure that could be used in that dialogue around qualities of program. And so in order to do that, we had to make some decisions around centralizing scoring so that we could then provide the data year after year and really examine that data to make sure that scoring was in fact being done in a reliable and valid manner, and that results would get back to candidates. And so we've moved forward with really a model that provided both formative opportunities and summative. And it was a question on all of our minds as to whether or not we could do that, have an assessment in place that would provide information directly back to candidates and their program supporters and the supervising teachers and all, as well as have a measure across the state that we could use. So early on, there was a lot of debate and discussion around who was going to pay for this, who was going to pay those local assessors, how was this going to be absorbed, because performance assessments have a cost. And then the move to centralized scoring shifted that local discussion about payment of assessment and candidates who were starting to be asked to provide some of those costs to allow for that local scoring to move to a centralized model. And when you work on scale, you can kind of control costs a little bit more. I mean, this all gets very technical very quickly, but that being said, there was a lot of pushback going on around time that it took from faculty, costs, et cetera. So we wanted to not lose the formative properties. So in the work of the commission's models and obviously for FAST and Ed TPA, there's been a lot of work to try and maintain that community of learners. We have done a great deal of work, particularly during the pandemic, offering, for example, direct opportunities for candidates to talk to commission staff who are engaged in developing this work, to hear their questions and to speak to them directly about what was working, what they're confused about, how we can be supportive to them in doing this work. And we've learned a lot from those conversations over the last 2 years that we have offered every single Wednesday to our candidates, both in teacher prep and in administrative prep. And during our pilot and field tests, we also reach out to our candidates for surveys directly to find out how they're engaging, what's clear, what's not clear, how we can improve things. So this is a long-winded response, David, to your question. There are pains on both sides, points of pain on both sides of having a locally administered and scored assessment as well as a centralized. And we have more data than we were able to put in this item to get at some of the questions that have come up. But in previous items that have come forward as we brought forward passing standards, there's a lot of explanation and data presented there from candidates, from program coordinators, from the assessors themselves as we built these together with educators in California for these models. So again, to get to a common measure that we can look across programs and use inside of our accreditation series of discussions, we felt at the time that it was important to move to centralized scoring. And so we're at a good point today to have this conversation and reflect on that, to learn from what everyone in the community has been telling us about these assessments and to continue to make them valid and reliable and really useful to candidates and useful to programs as they think about teacher development. And as our student liaison shared, really supporting the notion of becoming a reflective practitioner. There's a lot of things built into these assessments that allow for that kind of discussion and work, not only at the local level and within programs and within county offices and LEAs that run programs, but all the way up to the state level. And that's what some of the data after these first 3 years, even though the 2 years of the pandemic were a little challenging, we're just beginning to have data that's starting to show us patterns and trends that we then, all of us as a community, can work on. So appreciate all the questions. And David, I hope that was helpful in answering your question.
I just wanted to check in if Dr. Marino, were you wanting to address the question? You had your hand raised.
Amy's response was extremely
okay.
Well, so thank you. I can add a little bit just on the EdTPA side and the history of from moving because we were, those of you that were, I remember with PACT, right? That was all local scoring. And of course, the assessment design standards as they are written require each model to have a local scoring component. And so with EdTPA, that was very important within California as we moved to EdTPA that we offered that, and we did, and it's still there. I'll say it in the best way possible that there was a lot of enthusiasm and interest. And it just didn't, when it came time to scoring, the option to move, towards the national pool and the California specific trained scores, but the local scoring just didn't, it wasn't something that programs wanted to take up for a number of the reasons that Amy cited. Within a TPA, I'll say that within that move and discussion with the commission and Chair Sloan and Dr. Sandy, that we do have a local evaluation component, so that and it was a big effort among the programs in California, and a lot of support throughout the conferences and everything, when we could come together and say, look, this is what we're doing with our data. And the local evaluation protocol that NTPA has, and again, comes from, the folks that are on this call of doing that work early on in PACT and saying, we want to be able to use our data to improve, to know our candidates better, to know our program better, and inform our practices. And so that is available, and we really push that. But again, the option to use the centralized scoring has been the main choice.
Commissioner Simmons, does that address your questions? Okay, I'm gonna move on to Commissioner Greno-Shire, then Chair Sloan, and back around to, Commissioner Francois, did you have a comment on one of these questions or answers? Would Commissioner Greno-Shire? Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Commissioner Francois. Commissioner Francois, did you want to comment? You're on mute. Did you want to comment on the similar question that Commissioner Simmons asked?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Simmons just reminded me of something important we need to consider. And I too, Commissioner Simmons, have been around for a long time and did some of that early work with Dr. Moreno and Amy and whatnot. And one of the things that I have noticed over time, because you mentioned the quality of your candidates, the readiness on the first day is much higher as a result. And I think that I would also consider the role that the TPAs had in lifting up particular things that we know matter for candidate readiness. For instance, addressing your most vulnerable students and really seeing them and understanding them, and then creating a robust learning environment for them. Cultural relevancy, equity, universal UDL, all of those things. I think one of the benefits of the performance assessments is that those things were made, this is what you need to do, right? What I'm questioning is, I want to commend everybody who developed the TPAs because of that. Those really reflect what we care about. The question goes back to, though, what you and Commissioner Brown said, are we implementing performance assessment in a way that is most beneficial for our candidates' learning? And I go back to the high-stake nature of it. Not that performance assessments are not good. They're fabulous. And like I said before, we've been using them for decades. But I think that variable of what we ask candidates to focus on statewide, not just at individual programs based on their own mission and values, but what our values are as a state in the teacher profession. Really, the performance assessments have allowed us to lift those things up and live those values in ways that we weren't before as a collective.
Great, thank you so much. And Chair Sloan, I just want to make sure you also did not want to comment on Commissioner Simmons' question before. Okay, so back to Commissioner Greno-Shire. Thank you for being patient, and then we'll move to Chair Sloan after that.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. I I think Gary Hart would really appreciate the nature of this conversation and the dialectical quality as we as a commission reflect deeply on what our outstanding staff and our consultants have just presented to us. And so I just wanted to point that out, that this is the kind of work that I don't know if people who don't watch commission meetings understand this deep work that we all do. And so let me just thank all of you for that. I'm struck by the word reflection that has been used so many times over the last 40 minutes or so. And while I know this is an information item only that the staff has presented to us, I'm wondering, given our continued work with our strategic planning process, given our stated and authentic commitment to ensuring diversity, equity, and inclusion, if we might think about this as an opportunity to look even deeper at the performance assessment and the impact it may be having on our candidates. Because again, I've heard it on both sides. I agree with all of my colleagues about the value of performance assessments. I also am recalling conversations when I was dean at Long Beach State about our faculty really engaged in the work of assessing, but then we moved to this centralized system. And Amy, you said exactly why we had to. So I'm just wondering if and when there'll be an opportunity for us to revisit this and to come back to the commission with some recommendations. I'm intrigued by Dr. Marino, who talked about that there are programs where we are seeing some bright spots. So can we learn more about those bright spots as we move this work forward? So thank you.
Thank you so much. Chair Sloan?
Thank you, Commissioner Granoff-Shire. That was similar to some of the comments I was going to make and ask about as we are coming into a time where we are developing new teacher performance assessments in special education and early childhood and literacy. Is this an opportunity for us as a commission to look at the totality of the work and consider all of the things that we have learned about the work, all the things that we have learned about how it has improved programs? We have evidence of that in the research literature. All of the ways in which it has also stretched programs thin and hasn't done the kinds of things for programs and candidates that we would like it to, for a number of various reasons. And there is a great deal of research out there now at this point in time. And I think it would behoove us to be able to compile some of this. I've heard several times commissioners saying, I want to understand the research. We hear people in public comments saying the research says, well, where is that research for commissioners to be able to access so that we can make good decisions about the work? One recent chapter that just came out as part of the National Academy of Education Evaluating and Improving Teacher Preparation Programs is all about using teacher performance assessments for program evaluation and improvement of teacher education. And the authors of that, Charles Peck, Maya Goodman-Young, and Wenzing Zhang, did a review of the literature and the work with respect to evaluating teacher preparation. And that's very recent. So that's one place to look. But there are many other places to look as well. The other critical things that we have learned over time, this has been an area that I have studied in my own work as a researcher, is that context does matter, as Dr. Marino stated, and it also other colleagues can speak to that as well. And there are a number of different contexts that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the student teaching context. I'm talking about the programs in which candidates are prepared and the ways in which they are prepared to do that work. I'm talking about whether the teacher performance assessment is integrated with the rest of the program, as Dr. Francois talked about earlier. The difference between the bright spots and others. We have learned a lot about that. And Amy, of our own commission staff, is extremely knowledgeable about this work. She has done this work for a very long time, and she has read the research for a very long time, and she's been engaged with people for a very long time doing this work. Getting a little long-winded, I apologize, but the last thing that I will say is, yes, I think it is time and a good opportunity, as Dr. Granoshire said, to see, as we bring in more, and particularly as we are adding on the literacy performance assessment, can we think about ways in which we support, and I mean also the state of California, to support programs and program faculty to be able to embed this work more fully, to be able to perhaps engage in the scoring in the ways that we used to, have some local scoring elements that really provide programs direct feedback, help program faculty speak a common language, look at common sources of evidence that help everyone understand and see what kind of practice they want to see in their programs. Those have been the ways in which the TPA has benefited programs. What can we do that could really use the TPA to its greatest benefits for our work? I agree with David Simmons. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we have to be very careful about that. And I think we are being very thoughtful about how we are doing our work in this area. So I want to, I know there was another point, but I will leave it. But thank you for this report. Thank you for our public comments. Thank you for commissioners. And I see that Commissioner De La Torre has his hand up, so I'm going to hand it over to him.
Thank you, Commissioner Sloan. One thing is, I do love the performance assessments, but I wanted to make a distinction between it being a high stakes gateway assessment into the teaching profession, as opposed to the performance assessment for improving teacher quality and teacher programs. Because once it becomes a high stakes assessment, it changes. And so that's my only concern.
Great.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Chair Sloan?
I remembered my last point, and thank you, Commissioner De La Torre, you reminded me of it. I also do think that we have to weigh the onus on programs and the onus on teacher candidates for passing these assessments. And that's another thing that I think that we have to really look at. No teacher candidate should ever be left alone in this work. It needs to be a very integrated part of preparation. We know from the research that is the ways in which several commissioners here who have worked with the TPA have speak to the fact that when it's integrated, it's developmental, it's authentic, and candidates are well supported in this work, then it's an effective part of their preparation. So that's the other thing we have to think about. This is not an assessment to leave candidates on their own. There has to be an onus on programs. There is some onus on programs, but let's keep that in mind too as we continue to think about this work.
Great. As we wrap this up, we have Commissioner Heredia and Commissioner Hartwick.
Okay, I'll be very quick. So when I looked at the data, which I just lost now, on the groups of students that do not pass or have low scores on this. I think, as we go forward, we have some lessons learned here, I think, which will benefit our work in the future. I think that what we can think about is that when we see these scores in year one, that we don't wait till year three to talk about, concerted efforts to bring about change to help these students pass. I mean, when I'm looking at the data and I see it in year one, I think year one should be like the immediate, red flags. Here, what is it that we need to do? And I'm especially concerned because I don't want certain groups of students to get discouraged. I want them to, I don't want them to feel as if they cannot, pursue this profession. And I want to make sure. I'd also be very interested to know what is it about programs in which the students do pass, especially our students of color. What is it about the program that they're in that helps them to be successful? What are those characteristics? And I think knowing that also helps us going forward with the specialist credentials, moving forward at that time. So, I just think this information, I think this is a great opportunity because now we can say is, what are the implications for this data? What is the implications for all future assessments and what we're going for? Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll wrap up with Commissioner Hartwick.
Thanks. I have just a quick, question and request. I appreciated hearing from a number of folks who talked about how valuable it would be to hear more from the candidates and successful candidates who have gone through the TPA process about what the value is to those candidates. And now that we have had the various TPAs around long enough, and I know the APA is of more recent vintage, but we do have the opportunity to get information from teachers who went through the TPA process a while ago and now have had the experience of practicing. So I guess my question and my request would be, my question is, have we solicited information from practitioners who've had a period of time, a year, a couple of years, 5 years since they went through the process about how they now see the value of that TPA process? And then I guess my request would be, with the information that we gather as we continue to go forward, and if we are able to gather more information from practitioners, I would be very interested in seeing not only information from practitioners as they're going through the TPA process, but how they reflect back on that, a year later, several years later, multiple years into their practice, about what it mean, what they think it means for their practice upon reflection, and how they have hopefully, integrated what they learned through the TPA process and so on. So that's just a request for thinking about the type of longer term information we might be able to solicit.
Yep. Thank you so much. Thank you to the public. Thank you to all the commissioners. As we wrap this up, I don't think I see any other hands. Commissioner Sandy, Executive Director Sandy, and then Commissioner Brown, were you just pointing out Executive Director Sandy? Got it.
Thank you so much for this rich conversation. I think that Gary Hart would appreciate the dialectic and and how it focuses the mind on things we need to know. I remember pre-pandemic, we were having in-person implementation conferences for the TPA and for the APA, where faculty and assessment directors and candidates gathered together. I remember particularly the panels of candidates that were reflecting on their experiences of going through the performance assessment process and how it helped shape their practice as an educator. And I think it would be valuable to bring that into some kind of study session with all of you commissioners. We set this item forward as a discussion of what has been the performance of the instruments that we've approved for performance assessment over a 3-year period. And that 3-year period included some pretty strange years, right? The 1920 was a very strange year to look at data for anything because everything was in such flux. But that said, it's very important for us to be transparent about what's happening with these instruments, where are they having impact, and what kinds of impacts are they having. So it seems to me that a deeper dive into some of the questions and issues that have surfaced here are important. The reflection on what is the problem we were trying to solve with performance assessments long ago that led us to place this in statute as a requirement. Why have we made this a key part of how we shape preparation of teachers in general education, now in special education, coming forward in early childhood education, for administrators? What's been the momentum that has led to that? I think is a really important kind of framing understanding that this item wasn't necessarily designed to do. And I think it's really important to go back to some of those fundamentals, to remember the linkages and the modeling of the development of these systems based on the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards as a model for how you get teachers in very powerful ways to reflect on their practice and to begin to articulate what's happening with their practice. The ability to do that is so important to getting deeper in it. So why have we done this? How is it being experienced by the people who are actually doing it? I will tell you, across the country and since the very beginning, back in 1998, when we were sponsoring Senate Bill 2042, which made this a requirement for credentialing, the engagements with faculty at that time were there was a fair amount of shock and awe in the system about what in holy heck are we doing here? Because the academy is not always used to being having the state bring an instrument in and help them organize their practice around it. But some of the early research from UC Santa Barbara under the direction of Chair Sloan shed some powerful light on how this instrument can be a very useful thing. So I really value that we've had this beginning of a conversation here, that we're going to get back into, bring it into the strategic planning umbrella to dig deep and, determine what we're prepared to confirm in this work and what we think we need to shift in this work going forward. So thank you for that. And thank you for this very, very rich conversation.
Yeah.
We'll plan something. We'll put
Okay.
it on your agenda.
Well, thank you to everyone and really nice summary, Executive Director Sandy. And again, to the commission staff, this is, you're at the forefront nationally, and it's a great time to reflect on this as we do this for our state and as other states look at us and how we provide formative support and assessment for new teacher candidates. So thank you, everyone. We're going to go ahead and this, because there is no action item needed, it was an information item. And I want to thank Mr. Taylor, Mr. Sarda, Ms. Robbie, Ms. Marino, Ms. Ulrich, and Ms. Walterner. And we'll move on to our next agenda item before breaking for lunch. All right, so commissioners, that was my hint that we're going to continue to go and have lunch at 1, hopefully, or around that time. And so just kind of going to beg your indulgence, and we're going to move to item 3B. Okay, I don't see any serious objections, so I'm going to keep going. Our next item, 3B, is proposed teaching performance assessment requirement for teachers earning more than 1 teaching credential. This item is being presented by James Webb and Aaron Scoble. This is an action item. Mr. Webb, will you please begin?
Thank you, Commissioner Martinez. And good morning, commissioners. Actually, afternoon, it is after 12. As Commissioner Martinez stated, joining me this morning is Aaron Scoble, the Director of the Certification Division, in case there are questions or concerns from commissioners about potential regulatory language or other items related to this particular item. This item presents for the Commission's discussion and potential adoption a requirement that teachers earning more than 1 teaching credential simultaneously or over time need to pass only a single teaching performance assessment, or TPA, for the purposes of earning credentials. The application of this requirement for a range of teaching credentials is discussed in the item, and this item also recommends an amendment to the action taken by the Commission in June of 2021 that specifies which TPA should be taken by candidates pursuing dual credentials. At the conclusion of this item presentation, staff is recommending 3 recommendations. A, to direct staff to endorse regulations that require educators to pass only a single TPA. B, to adopt the recommendations presented for teachers who hold different credential types and seek an additional teaching credential. And C, amend prior Commission action from June of 2021 that specified which TPA should be taken by candidates seeking dual credentials. As seen on page 1 of this item, background is included on the TPA requirement, including the references to Ed Code and the law. As a result of these requirements, questions in the educator preparation community have surfaced regarding whether candidates or teachers seeking both a general education and an education specialist credential, or more than one education specialist credential, would be required to take and pass a TPA in each credential area. As a friendly reminder, all Commission-approved TPAs meet the Commission's Assessment Design Standards, or ADS, and the current approved TPA programs, as you heard in Agenda Item 3A, include the Commission's model, Cal TPA, the Ed TPA developed by Scale, and FAST, used at California State University, Fresno, and is approved only for CSU Fresno candidates. At the June 2021 meeting, the Commission considered this question in relation to candidates enrolled in dual credential programs, and commissioners determined that these candidates should only be required to take and pass one teaching performance assessment. In terms of requiring a single teaching performance assessment for all teacher candidates, 3 particular areas of note are presented in the item. General education and education specialist credentials share a universal set of TPEs and also include the TPEs that are specialized to pertain to each credential area. In assessing these TPEs, the general education and ed specialist TPAs developed by the Commission and Scale, Ed TPA, have a common structure that require candidates to do the following: plan asset-based instruction, adapt that instruction to learners, content, and the context in which they are teaching, include video recording of their teaching, reflect on the outcomes of their teaching, and then applying their learning about meeting the needs of their students and their own teaching practice to the next lesson. Another piece of consideration is that requiring the passage of a second TPA and another teaching credential would place an additional requirement on candidates that would duplicate the expectation of candidates to demonstrate similar competencies and would not necessarily add more value. Thirdly, teachers seeking a second credential will have the opportunity to learn, to practice, and be assessed on the TPEs for their new credential, building on the knowledge, skills, and abilities gained by passing the TPA in their first credential areas. The Commission has taken a similar action of requiring only one experience in a teacher's professional requirement with teacher induction. When the Commission adopted the new induction standards in 2017, it established a policy that teachers earning a clear credential should complete induction once and not repeat induction a second time if adding a second or other subsequent teaching credential. There's a reference for the Commission's review with a PSA that outlines these requirements. For current teaching credential holders seeking subsequent teaching credentials, commissioners can look on page 3 at a table entitled Credential Holders Seeking a Subsequent Credential. As a reminder, the TPA requirement first became effective for candidates in general ed, multiple subject, and single subject in 2008. So not all teachers who hold a valid teaching credential have completed a TPA. In my reference to Table 1, it does identify the different types of credentials and suggests when a TPA should be required for teachers who hold valid credentials and want to add another credential. The guiding principle here is that teachers who have cleared their credentials or who hold a life credential have already demonstrated their proficiency through their experience in the classroom. For those candidates seeking 2 or more credentials simultaneously, the Commission did adopt a policy in June of 2021 for credential seekers who are working on that credential simultaneously. In the scenarios, the candidates would be required, based on the Commission's prior action, to take and pass the TPA in the credential area requiring more specialized knowledge, skills, and abilities, and those outcomes are on page 3 of this item. Based on feedback from preparation programs and from the current field tests with the Education Specialist TPA, staff recommends that the Commission amend its prior action by allowing candidates earning 2 or more credentials simultaneously to confer with their programs to determine which TPA they should take. This action would provide candidates seeking 2 or more credentials simultaneously with needed flexibility to take the TPA that best aligns with their field placement and career goals. As a review, the 3 staff recommendations are that the Commission directs staff to promulgate regulations that require educators to pass only a single TPA, that the Commission adopt the recommendations presented for teachers who hold different credential types and seek an additional teaching credential, and that the Commission amend prior Commission action specifying which TPA should be taken by candidates seeking multiple credentials simultaneously. If the recommendations are adopted, staff proposes to bring proposed regulatory language to implement these decisions to the Commission in April of 2022. And that concludes the presentation of the item. And I will now take any questions or invite Commission discussion at this time. And again, Erin Skubal is with me. And if there are questions related to certification, I may defer to my colleague, Erin, to answer those.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Webb. So we're going to go ahead and open for public comment. If there are members of the public that like to give a presentation, please notify the meeting moderator by clicking on the raise hand icon. If you're participating through Zoom, if you're participating through the phone, press *9. Recording secretary, are there any public comments?
Yes, Nicole Marino. Please unmute your microphone or turn on your microphone and share your comment.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that if I'm reading this correctly, and given the way that the EdDPA was designed, that the item is suggesting that candidates who are seeking, for example, the MMSN or ESN would be required to take the ESN. And the way that the EdDPA was designed was that it happens towards the end of a preparation program. And so the implication is that programs would then have to make sure that those experiences are positioned in a program appropriately, because it was not the intention that the EdDPA would be completed, for example, towards the beginning of a program.
Great, thank you for your comments and questions. Recording secretary, other comments or questions?
There are no additional requests for public comment.
Okay. Let's give it a little bit. And as we close the public comment period now, so we are officially closing the public comment period. We'll move to commissioners, remember we need to direct the staff, and then we also need 2 action items. So I saw that Commissioner Gross has her hand raised, and then Commissioner Simmons, and so we'll start with our 2 commissioners.
So I'm mulling over this amendment recommendation, and I hear the concern about the need for candidate flexibility, right, based on their placement. But I'm also wondering, what are we trying to measure? And if we're trying to measure our candidates prepared for the most specialized credential, that's one thing. If we're trying to measure, can a candidate teach? That's like, right? Like, and I worry that within that flexibility that we're not capturing the measurement that we actually want. Can candidates earning a mild to moderate support needs, extensive support needs, are they ready to go day one in supporting those populations? Because as an education specialist myself, that's very different and, like support set of skills than can you go into a TK through 5 classroom. And one of the observations that I've experienced this year supporting some of our new candidates is that our special education candidates are not prepared for the day-to-day life of instruction and IEPs. So I need more information about why this recommendation beyond just flexibility of placement, because for me, that's a programming issue, not a student issue. So I need more information about that.
Commissioner Gross, that's an excellent question. And what commission staff did is we reviewed what the current TPEs and program standards require with regard to the mild to moderate support needs and the extensive support needs requirements, especially when it comes to field placements. And what there was a concern is that I agree with you that if we look at a mild to moderate classroom and compare that with an extensive support needs, you are going to see vastly different supports in place for the students who are in those settings or who possibly could be in co-teaching or other types of classroom or non-classroom placements. However, what the concern could be is that we didn't want it to become, for lack of a better term, a Sophie's choice type of thing where a candidate is forced to take a performance assessment that doesn't align with their career goals and or where they see themselves in the trajectory of their teaching career. Because when a candidate is possibly pursuing both a mild to moderate and an extensive support needs, we cannot predict as to where they are. Are they an intern in an MMSN setting? So then if we are going to say that they would take the ESN TPA, for example, that then they need to find a classroom that could possibly not be where their current placement is, or vice versa, ESN setting. And if they see themselves more as a mild to moderate, would they stay in that particular setting in order to be able to complete the TPA requirement? We would like to assume that it's best practice that a candidate would be advised by their program that they would take the highly specialized setting for their TPA. But the concern was that if we place that restriction in a regulatory way, for example, that it might restrict candidates and their programs to be able to provide a path in order for them to complete their TPA requirement in an authentic and truly applicable setting to where they are currently placed. We're not saying that we would, to use Commissioner Simmons, throw everything out, baby with the bathwater. I've heard that cliche used. However, like I said, best practice would be that, but the concern would be mandating it could be problematic in its actual execution.
Is that also true for a candidate who is doing a multiple subject credential and one ed specialist credential, that they could do the general ed credential, the Cal TPA, and not do the ed specialist TPA?
Again, it would depend on where they are in terms of their placement, but that's why staff felt that by including the language around conferencing with the program and conferencing with the candidate would provide an opportunity for the candidate to share the program where they see themselves most likely with their teaching assignment.
May I add
Thank you.
something?
Megan,
your
question was about
Yeah, Mr. Webb, you'll need to mute, I think.
Oh, I am
Yeah.
so sorry. Let me
No,
mute
that's
myself.
okay. Thank you, James. Try again. Amy, you're on mute now? You don't want to say anything?
Do we still have an echo?
Nope, you're good.
Excellent. Megan, your concern was about, are we measuring the right thing for the candidate for the credential? And I just wanted to add to James's explanation to remember that the TPA is one measure for a candidate. A candidate who's in a dual program has to complete the appropriate coursework for both credentials as well as the clinical practice. And so trying to provide flexibility given concerns around not wanting to have candidates be held back because of their potential placement, and because so many of the TPEs come across both credentials, from the universal TPEs in the gen ed model to the universal TPEs in the mild to moderate and or the ESN. And then there's some differentiation obviously between mild to moderate and ESN TPEs. Those TPEs would be picked up and the candidate would have to demonstrate their capacity to work with children in the mild to moderate setting, as well as children and students if they were pursuing the ESN. So here we're putting into really the lap of the program the expectation that if a candidate is pursuing two credentials simultaneously, that they in fact do have the opportunity to learn and experience all that they need to be really prepared to support the children and students depending on the setting that they end up working in. So I hope that helps a little bit to come back to your question about how do we know the candidate's actually ready for the multiple credentials they are pursuing, and then moving on and will teach in those settings using those credentials. So again, a strong recommendation to programs to work carefully with that candidate, to think about where that candidate wants to spend their professional career, and truly making sure from the program's perspective that that candidate demonstrated through formative assessments at the program level and the coursework that they were in fact ready, even if they do their TPA in the gen ed setting or the MMSN setting or the ESN. So I hope that helps clarify a little. It's sort of spread responsibility across multiple opportunities for candidates to demonstrate competency.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Simmons, and then Commissioner Brown and Chair Sloan. Uh-oh. Commissioner Simmons, you're gonna have to throw a quarter or whatever you do in your desk because you're mute.
Okay, I just want to say thank you to Commissioner Gross, because that really did crystallize my thinking on this, because I really do believe that we are assessing teaching not for particular assignments. And I'm very comfortable with letting programs figure out what is going to be the best for a particular candidate. I know just in my little district, we have severe programs for students with autism, students with emotional disturbance, students with intellectual disabilities. And the settings are so different that, I mean, we couldn't have somebody trained in every possible setting. I think that by having an assessment that demonstrates that the person knows how to teach really is where I think we should be going with this. It's always the question of, do you go with breadth or you go with depth? And I think that for the TPA, it's such a deep measure that I'm comfortable with saying to the program, both through everything from their chapter tests and the coursework, all the way to the actual clinical practice. I'm actually fine with giving programs that autonomy so that they can work with their candidate to give the best possible outcome. I do have a question though that I wanted to ask about table 1, where it says preliminary or level 1, and then there's the EG afterwards, where it says earned a credential prior to TPA requirement. That would be a really old preliminary or level 1, right? Okay.
Yes, it would. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I'm fine with it. I think this is an excellent item. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Commissioner Brown?
Well, this may be a measure more about my low blood sugar than anything else, but let me just ask 3 questions. Is this only about people who are trying to get a general ed and a special ed credential simultaneously? Or is it also applying to those who would seek a different credential later and therefore would not be in the one program, but would only be in the other?
That is correct. So this is not just for general ed and ed specialists. This could be, for example, a candidate who is multiple subject and single subject. And so the same rule would apply that, as Commissioner Simmons pointed out, the autonomy of the program to decide what they would take. And to Amy's point, measuring the TPEs and looking at where they see themselves, it would apply in that situation as well. So those are 2 credentials within the general education realm, because we do have candidates, of course, that seek both a multiple subject and often a single subject credential.
Again, let me ask that question, James. The way you say it is, it sounds like that's when people are trying to do both of them at the same time. Is that all that we're looking at? Or are we also, because when it says proposed teaching performance assessment requirement for teachers earning more than 1 teaching credential, the first thing I thought of was someone who's been teaching elementary school for a while and decides they want to teach high school biology.
Correct.
5 years later. Is that also the case?
That is, yes, that is the correct. Yeah, you are absolutely correct. That's where we're talking about a subsequent credential over time. Because as you know, there could be a teacher who had earned their multiple subject, took a TPA, now wants to teach single subject math. And so then a TPA would not be required. Only the items that are required, Aaron, forgive me, that reg number,
Yes,
what is it?
That's exactly what I was going to bring up, James.
Thank you.
So there is already actually a pathway for a prepared single or multiple subject credentialed teacher to add an additional teaching credential in the general education realm based on completion of a methodology course and subject matter. And that's the 80499 process, as we like to call it. That's the regulation number that exists for that pathway. So those individuals do not have to take a subsequent TPA to move from, say, the multiple subject to the single subject credential or vice versa. So this definitely would be for an individual who perhaps has earned a multiple subject credential either at the preliminary or the clear level, and then wants to move to a special education credential. That's what the table refers to as far as looking at whether they did or did not take the TPA to earn that initial credential, and what area they would fall in as far as whether they do or do not have to take the TPA. So that the table really addresses folks who have previously earned a credential and are not earning 2 credentials at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if I can, and I'm almost done here, and you guys are voting, but I'm trying to figure out, so this, it sounds like it assumes that once a teacher knows how to teach, it doesn't matter what, maybe it's that the classroom is identical across all levels, which isn't so. And so that's a concern of mine. And also, lastly, is the intent of induction to make sure that someone has the teachings, can teach in that? I mean, is there a reason that we do a preliminary credential and then a clear? Because we're thinking it's going to take more support and practice and reflection to get good enough to do that, right? In which case we're eliminating that for this, right? They don't need induction at all in the second credential ever. Is that what we're deciding on?
No, Commissioner
Okay.
Brown, the example for induction was just to show that there has been past precedents that the commission has taken where they decided and supported the idea that only one induction experience would be required of a teacher, so that if a candidate were to go back and earn the other credential, and the program sponsor is applying for it, they would not apply for a preliminary. It would go straight to clear based on the prior action that was taken by the commission.
Okay, you've answered my questions. It's still not entirely clear, and I defer to the rest of the commission, but my concern is that someone is asking to get another credential, and that circumstance is a very different teaching circumstance, and simply taking a course or a few courses might not be adequate preparation. That's all.
Right, I'm going to move towards Chair Sloan, then Commissioner Marquita Grenier, and then Commissioner De La Torre. Oh, actually, Commissioner Heredia, I think you had your hand up earlier too. Sorry, split screens, sometimes I miss it. So I think actually after, I think you're next actually, Commissioner Heredia.
Can you remind me again, if I have a multiple subject credential, because I have forgotten how this works since I'm not involved in this day-to-day anymore. So if I have a multiple subject credential and I feel like down the road I want to teach history, what is required of me? Is it 2 courses? Is it a methodology course, and what other course?
So it depends on how you're moving. So if you're moving from a multiple subject to a single subject credential, you would need to meet the subject matter requirement for that subject area that you want to teach. You would need to complete a methodology course in that subject area you want to teach. You'd have to also have hold the English learner authorization. And well, for California prepared candidates, that's embedded in their program. But for, say, a candidate who comes from out of state or out of country, they would have to ensure that they've earned that authorization. And then they would get a subsequent credential comparable to what they hold. So if they have a preliminary, they would get a preliminary in the single subject area. If they have a clear, they would get a clear in the single subject area. And so that regulation has been, available to candidates who also want to move from a single subject credential in one content area to add an additional content area to that single subject credential.
Okay, so I'd have to take the CSET.
Yes, some form of subject matter competence would need to be verified. So previously it was either just the CSET or a program for subject matter competence, but now we also have the degree option and the coursework option as well.
Okay, so it's CSET plus a methodology?
Yes.
Okay, so no, I don't have to be observed in the classroom because it's assumed that I can already teach.
Yes, correct.
Okay, I echo Commissioner Brown's concerns. There's sometimes in context, it's the methodology is so different and the context is so different. So let me ask one more question. So at that time, if I'm in a multiple subject credential program, I can be observed student teaching in a single subject history class, for example. Correct?
If I'm understanding your question, let's go back. If I'm a candidate and am I enrolled in a multiple subject program or a single subject program?
Multiple subject.
Okay, the coursework and the clinical practice would be in a multiple subject setting.
Right, correct.
Right. And so you're asking, would I be able to be observed in a single subject, let's just say social studies classroom, correct?
Correct.
If I believe, and Aaron or Amy, please support me in this one if I get it wrong, you would not be observed in the single subject setting, correct?
Not
No.
even by request. And that would have no influence on the credential. Okay. I'm just trying to find a way to, get at this performance.
Right.
performance.
Well, if I can just share my own experience, I'm a credentialed teacher in both English and social studies. I came in prior to the TPA requirement, and I got my English credential, but then I added a social studies credential. I did not have to take the TPA because I had demonstrated and already had a clear English credential. And with the transfer of knowledge that we often talk about in terms of the TPEs, that transference was indeed there because of the work that I had done, previously earning my original clear credential.
Yeah, I understand that. I just had extra units in social science, which allowed me then to teach at the single subject level in history classes. I was pre all of this also, so it was much more simple then. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate your questions.
Great, thank you, everyone. Commissioner Chair Sloan, you still? Yeah, your hand up. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to respond to 2 points. One, with the context-specific issue. This is a tough one. Anybody earning a credential in the state of California is qualified to teach across the entire state, across multiple contexts. We can't assess every single one of those, and that's always been a challenge in our work. One thing we do have in our system is accreditation. And one of the requirements of accreditation is that all programs need to provide us, the commission, with all of the ways in which they assess candidates on each of the TPEs. The performance assessment assesses them on particular TPEs, but not all of them. And the programs then have to create a matrix for new commissioners who aren't familiar with our accreditation. Each program needs to come and provide a matrix that has all of the TPEs and their elements listed on one side. And then across the top, they have all of their courses and experiences and et cetera. And in this matrix, they need to identify where TPE concepts are introduced, where TPE concepts are practiced, and where and how they're assessed. And that's for every single one of them. And that ensures the commission that all of the TPEs and the standards that we require for quality and effectiveness of teachers is being assessed in a program. And it is the combination of these two things that help us know that an educator is ready to teach. So that is our current system. And that helps then allow programs to design experiences and supports for the candidates in the communities in which they're teaching and in which they're placed, which, as we know, can differ. Some programs will specialize in particular areas, and their candidates may want to be in those places, and they may also want to continue teaching in those places. But the fact of the matter is they're earning a California credential, and they will go across the state, and therefore they have to be ready in multiple ways. So that's the first thing, accreditation and local assessments. Can our local assessments get better? Of course, they can always be better. And one of the things that we're starting to do as a field, and I say the field of teacher education, is that just like in teaching, where teachers can feel very isolated within their classrooms, unless they're part of a larger community of practice. Teacher education has for a while been moving more formally into developing these communities of practice around particular things, whereby teacher educators from across different programs are sharing particular kinds of practices. They're called a number of things. They're called learning communities. They're called networked improvement communities. Some are more formal than others. I know the CSU system has a very large, more formal networked improvement community that's facilitated by their central in a number of different ways to ensure that teacher educators are learning from one another. Amy Rising supports a learning community within the Cal TPA and Cal APA work. And that's not just about how do we score. That is about what does this concept mean? What does it mean what does it look like to really identify a student with particular assets and needs? And what does it look like to plan for supporting that student in the best way possible? So we have done this in our performance assessment work with PACT and at TPA and Cal TPA. We've done some of our systems do this. And as our field is moving towards this more, I'll give one last example. One of the research center that I run, the California Teacher Education Research and Improvement Network, one of their communities of practice involved supervisors of teacher education. For the past 2 summers, especially right after the pandemic hit, supervisors needed help on how are we going to observe teacher candidates in virtual environments. And so CTARN facilitated an opportunity for supervisors across multiple programs to get together and share their work. And it was enormously powerful, and supervisors rarely had that opportunity before. And it has grown, and the work has grown, and everybody is better as a result of that. We as a commission can start capitalizing perhaps a little bit more on this kind of learning and the ways in which programs are getting better around the local assessments that they are using. So am I concerned about the fact that we can't use our formal performance assessments for every single credential a candidate earns? I'm not, as long as our accreditation, as we have set it up, is robust enough. I am not, as long as our field continues to be able to support learning across programs. And I'm not, as long as we have these spectacular staff managing our work. Thanks.
Very comprehensive. Thank you so much, Chair Sloan. Commissioner Grenner-Shire.
Chair Sloan took the words right out of my mouth with her first point. The only thing I would add is that given these multiple places where we are assessing the work, I trust my EPP colleagues, along with our CTC staff, to ensure that our candidates are well prepared. So that's it.
Great, wonderful. Let's see, Commissioner De La Torre, did you have your hand up earlier?
I did. It was a question about because I know that there's a path for teacher certification or credentialing by passing national board. Does this affect those teachers at all? Does it impact them at all?
I don't believe it would. No. I don't believe it would impact them at all. Because they would have to adhere to the requirements for the preliminary credential that they earn prior to doing national board. So I don't think it would impact them at all. No.
Okay, thank you.
Well, never mind.
We can further tease that out a little bit with a little bit of more time to think about it.
All I was going to say is, Commissioner De La Torre, are you talking about a national board teacher that comes in from another state? And that
well, it's both. So teachers that come in that are board certified from another state, there's a pathway for them to earn a credential in California that has different requirements. But I'm thinking of California teachers who are already credentialed, let's say a multiple subject credential, elementary school teacher at a middle school, who then passes a single subject national board and then earns a single subject credential at the earlier. Does it have that pathway? Does it impact them?
That is similar to the 80499 process, where that process already exists and it doesn't have a TPA component attached to it. So that's why I'm fairly certain it wouldn't affect them. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. So Commissioner Brown, we're going to, I think, wrap up with you and move to our motion around this.
Fair enough. The reason I just keep putting my hand up is because the place that I'm looking at is the development of an early childhood education specialist and the huge need that there's going to be in the state of California for early childhood well-prepared teachers to teach young children quickly. So that's why I was asking questions. Executive Director or Director Sloan, thank you for articulating out what's already going on for things that some of us in early childhood aren't as familiar with. But that's why I sounded so intense.
Well, earlier you thought it was the blood sugar issues, but do you have any direction that you want to provide, Commissioner Brown, around the early childhood?
All I'm saying is there's going to be thousands of people that need to teach hundreds of thousands of children and don't know how yet. That's
right.
all. Sorry. Yep, that's the blood
Minor,
sugar.
small thing.
Sorry about that.
Small thing. No worries. Okay. All right. So I don't see any hands up, so I'm going to move to what we need to do right now. And one part. Oh, hold on, Commissioner Chair Sloan.
I was just going to move to make a motion.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
All right. I move that we adopt staff recommendations, specifically that that we direct staff to promulgate regulations that require educators to pass only a single TPA, that we that the commission adopt recommendations presented for teachers who hold different credential types. What? I'm sorry, I'm reading the middle. Erin, maybe you could help me.
So it was adopt the recommendations presented for teachers who hold different credential types and seek an additional teaching credential.
All right. And the third being amend our prior commission action specifying which TPA should be taken by candidates seeking multiple credentials simultaneously.
Correct. So I have a motion by Commissioner Sloan, and it looks like I have a second by Commissioner De La Torre. Great. And any further discussion? Let me just go back to one screen. Okay, it looks like I don't have any. Okay, so with the recording secretary, call for a vote. Each member, please respond with aye, nay, or abstain.
Jose Cardenas,
Aye.
Michael De La Torre,
Aye.
Marisol De La Torre Escobedo,
Aye.
Megan Gross,
Aye.
Johanna Howick,
Aye.
Susan Aradia,
Aye.
Harry Jackson,
Aye.
Bonnie Clark,
Aye.
Monica Martinez,
Aye.
David Simmons,
Aye.
Tina Sloan.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Webb, and thank you, Erin Sobel. There you are. I'm just looking for the screen. And thank you too, Ms. Skubal. So you guys have a really good internal clock, because having no additional agenda items today, I'm going to recess the Educator Preparation Committee until tomorrow and turn this back over to Chair Sloan.
Thank you, Commissioner Martinez. So this is, the commission is going to break for lunch. We are also going to go into closed session after lunch. Therefore, we are going to be moving to tomorrow, item 3C, assessing literacy instruction, and item 3D, proposed adoption of passing score standard for dance and theater. Any questions? Concerns?
Just a point of clarification, Madam Chair, that we are scheduled to begin the meeting with item 4A. And then I believe from there you will pick up the Ed Prep Committee agenda and take it in order.
Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate that. And another reminder to everyone that we start tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.
Great. All right. And Chair Sloan, how long do you want us to take for lunch?
I would really like us, because we do have such a big closed session, to take a half hour to stretch and move, but feel free to come back and have an eating opportunity while we're in closed session, okay? Okay, so let's just take 30 minutes and we will be back in closed session at 1:30. And staff, we have all of the instructions for that on our email. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
We can send it out again as well.
Thank you. And Student Liaison Baez, did you have something to say before we leave?
Yeah, I just had a quick clarification. I don't have to come back for closed session, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So I'll see everybody tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.